So this is Saturday the 17th of December, late on in the evening, and I just wanted to say something about the Brexit business, because they are, I'm just going to turn the heater off. We've just had the slightly awkward and embarrassing footage or video emerging of Theresa May, the UK Prime Minister, at some meeting of the powers that be in Brussels. And afterwards you see them all glad-handing each other. They don't show you much of the proceedings, but they show you them going around, you know, shaking each other by the hand and all that stuff. And nobody's there shaking her hand, and everyone's ignoring her, and she's looking around awkwardly, looking every inch the vicar's daughter at a rave party. So it's really kind of starting to show the UK is getting shunned slightly. And between Boris Johnson, his diplomatic skills, and the fact we've got two other people who are in the negotiating mix as well as the Prime Minister, is all very awkward. But that's not what I want to talk about, the awkwardness. I want to talk about the straightforward logic of it. Apparently nobody wants to hurt anybody, and we don't want a repeat of what happened after the Treaty of Versailles, after the First World War, where Germany, a major country, it doesn't matter which country it is, if you push any country hard enough they'll have a war, but Germany felt the need to assert itself, and there was an appetite in Germany at that time to assert itself because things were so hard. While understandably the rest of Europe felt it needed to keep a grip on things and stop Germany from making armaments and stuff. But in times of recession, which basically there was after the First World War, there's the issue of how do you make money? And of course all of Europe would tool up again in case there was another war. So you could have made money making armaments, but for obvious reasons Europe didn't want Germany to be a country that was doing that. In the end, of course, what happened was Germany took over Sudetenland, part of Czechoslovakia, and used it to manufacture tanks and all sorts before moving into Poland, because that part of Czechoslovakia was full of manufacturing, a capability that Germany had been stripped of after the First World War. Okay, so the Versailles Treaty was what we would call nowadays a suite of sanctions against Germany after the First World War. Right, so Hitler swept the power based on saying, stuff it, we'll do what we want, never mind what they say, and never mind the Versailles Treaty. So he more or less tore up the sanctions and said, we'll do what we like, we will make armaments if we want. And the Germans had an appetite for that at the time, among other things. Okay. So what I'm saying is, this is the exact situation where wars end up happening, because countries take sanctions against each other, and it builds step on step. So apparently nobody wants to hurt each other, and nobody wants a load of sanctions and counter-sanctions. The German car industry, you've heard all the arguments probably. The German car industry sells a fifth of what it makes to Britain. Of course, if Britain suddenly becomes poor overnight by divorcing itself from Europe, then that might not be the case. But nonetheless, and if the German car industry starts making a lot of electric cars, which is basically what BMW have vowed to do, and VW will do the same thing now, then that's a whole different world. That will probably sell quite well in the UK. So if nobody wants to hurt each other, and we've now got a chap called Rogers, who's some guy, I forget his first name, but he's now given a report to the British government saying it'll take 10 years, the Europeans are saying, to sort everything out with Brexit. You know, the divorce proceedings will take 10 years from Europe. Okay, so now we see that there's certain red lines. Everyone's saying they don't want major things to change. The Europeans don't want the immigration thing to change. The Brits are saying we don't want our free access to Europe to change. We don't want tariffs, because that's what it's all about. See, there's a bit of a misnomer when people say there's a free trade treaty or whatever, free trade agreements. What these agreements actually do is they're a bit like open government agreements. You know, they actually stipulate open government agreements how much secrecy there's going to be. It's the opposite to what they sound. So free trade agreements actually stipulate the things that, in a way, they stipulate the things that will have sanctions. They may not mention them, but that's in effect what's done. You can have free trade on this, this, and this, and this, but these things are either not mentioned or specially mentioned. You can't have free trade now, there have to be tariffs. So you can call it free trade if you like, but what it actually is saying the things you're not prepared to accept coming in, flooding into your country for free. Okay. So you might say they should have done that to Chinese steel, but they didn't. In Europe, anyway. So if Sir, what's his name, Rogers, is saying, the senior diplomat that's been sent out to ask the European countries what their view on Brexit is, if he's coming back with his report basically saying it'll take 10 years before the Europeans expect it all to be settled or pretty much settled, and if it's 2 years for the process to take place, why on earth, and I've said this before, I'll say again, why on earth are we rushing to press the button of Article 50? Why are we pulling the trigger on Article 50, which automatically, it says very little Article 50 except you 27 countries, you have all the power. Why are we rushing to do that in March? At the very least, we should have waited, I thought, until after the French elections, which will occur spring, June, next year, 2017. And then there's the German elections in September, October. These timetables are all known. So there might be a whole regime change. People you agree things with now. I mean, you might go ahead based on what Merkel said and press Article 50, giving them all the power. And Merkel might be a perfectly decent person, and Hollande. And then you get two people move in from the far right in both these countries. And they say, no, I'm not sticking to the loose agreement that Merkel made. I'm going to encourage other countries to mess you up. That could happen. You could get a kind of Trump-like person in Germany, or a Trump-like person in France, who says, I'm all about our place, not other countries. And they don't get the argument of mutual benefit. So why are we rushing to do it? There's no reason. What I said was we should rewrite Article 50 before we sign it. Article 50 was written by a bunch of countries that never expected anybody to dare to do it, and it was written to frighten any country into not doing it. But of course, you got a democratic vote. I won't go into why that was done, it's stupid, but anyway, you go to a democratic vote, the people say get stuff we want out, and suddenly you have to do it, and then everyone starts to scrutinise then. It's a bit like marriage. Anybody who scrutinises divorce papers and divorce proceedings before getting married probably wouldn't get married. So we're in a position where we're now scrutinising the divorce proceedings and going, oh my God, we're going to get absolutely buckered. So why give them the power? I say rewrite Article 50 in a friendly manner. If everyone's agreed we're all going to be friendly, we don't want to shaft each other, why not just agree that in Article 50? Rewrite the thing. Agree that, and then we press it. Knowing what we're pressing, or knowing 50% or 80% of what we're pressing for then. Only give them the power when we know that the basics are agreed in Article 50. But that's not what's being done, you see. It's extremely dangerous. There is a region in Brussels, in Belgium, called Wallandia. I mean, it's unbelievable, but it sounds like something at Lilliput. But the region called Wallandia is a real place, and it held up stuff on a major agreement recently, this year, 2016. It could just as easily hold up on every single paragraph of every single section of all of the agreement that we try to run past Europe in the next 2 years, 2.5 years. Wallandia, population 200,000. A tiny region of one of the tiniest countries, not the tiniest, we've got Liechtenstein, of one of the tiniest countries, tiny region of the tiniest country, one of the tiniest countries in the whole of Europe, could argue sentence by sentence, point by point, paragraph by paragraph, section by section until the cows come home. And that would be perfectly legal and proper, and Europe wouldn't be able to overturn it except by kicking that region to touch or by somebody bribing them, which is why they'd be doing it. That's why they had the last argument, so that Belgium would have to give Wallandia, a region of Belgium, a better deal. So multiply that by 27 countries. you're going to get some poxy little region in every single country. Maybe Catalan in Spain will come up with something because it wants pseudo-independence like Scotland's got. Leverage. That's how a lot of small regions will go see it. They'll follow the example of that region of Belgium. So I say this is ridiculous. This is to Theresa May and the government of the UK. Do not invoke Article 50 until it has been rewritten to be much more favourable and balanced. I'll give you an example of what I really mean. In Scotland, there are political parties that got maybe 2.5 million votes, and they got 1 MP representing them. There is a country in Britain, Scotland, which has only about that number of votes in it, and it's got 50 MPs. Now, why the difference is because there's a notable section of the United Kingdom which, in order to give it any kind of strength, it has to have a ballooned group of MPs, or nobody'd ever listen to it. So it has to be overrepresented. That's the only way it works. If you represented Scotland with less MPs, there'd be probably some kind of revolution. So the only reason Scotland's put up with what it's got is because it's got an over-representation. So what I'm saying is, it should really be 50-50 in Article 50. You know, anyone wanting to leave should almost have equal rights to discussions and equal weight as the whole 27 countries. That, you see, would result in a fair fight, as it were, or a fair agreement. But to hand over the power, not even to be one country against 27, but actually to say, all you 27 have the power, and us one country that are leaving, we leave it up to you. We give up our legal rights. That's basically what you're saying. That's what Article 50 does. It's meant to spike a country to frighten everybody from leaving, and up till now it worked. But now Brexit's happening. And so the whole basis of this is flawed. There's no logic to it. March seems ridiculous. If it's going to take 10 years, the Europeans say, to get this agreement done, why on earth are we rushing into it? That is utter nonsense and makes no sense. If you do it, you're foolish. Okay? I wouldn't like to see it imposed in another country, and I don't want to see it imposed in the UK. So if the Europeans mean what they say, that they're friendly and they don't mean to stick it to us, let's see it. Because now they're talking about fishing rights having to stay the same, immigration having to stay the same. Everyone's setting out red lines that make it almost pointless to leave. You know, if people voted for a certain thing, there are certain things they voted for, and spiking each of those things and sticking it to a country when it leaves, I'm saying avoid that. Rewrite Article 50 to give the leaving party the same weight as the 27 parties who are still in. Rewrite Article 50, get most of the leaving worked out, and then invoke it. And if it's going to take 10 years, then there just isn't any rush. I say spend 4 years rewriting the thing. That's all. Thanks for watching and listening.